Okay, so here's a presentation I recently gave at a Marketo user group on making sense of UTMs, program member custom fields, and syncing to Salesforce. Um, just about me, I'm a principal solutions architect at Sponge. I'm a Marketo certified expert and Salesforce advanced admin. Um, just to start, I want to give a little bit of context around UTMs. Um, It's generally just, parameters we append to URL to find out, where traffic is coming from. Um, Everyone is really looking for this attribution data, but, you know, people are generally pretty bad about using it. So UTMs are pretty critical in terms of attributing traffic to, the original source of where they came from. Um, but it's really important I'm going to kind of gloss through this a little bit. But the crux of it is it's really important to have this on all of your links from not your website to your website in order to know where it's coming from, whether that's email or social media or whatever. Um, so in order to get on this train, generally we want to recommend having a UTM builder, standardize exactly what you mean by each one of these parameters, use pick lists where possible, and just get serious about it so that every time you're creating a link, you're putting UTMs on it, and then you're able to know where is this traffic coming from. So once you get this attributed in Google Analytics, for example, the next kind of logical step is getting this data into Salesforce. Um, I'm going to gloss over this again, but generally speaking, there are, in my opinion, two correct ways to structure your Salesforce campaigns in order to attribute anything back to what marketing is doing. Option one is creating unique Salesforce campaigns for each combination of channel and offer. So you would have one campaign for my awesome ebook that you're promoting on LinkedIn paid social ads, another campaign for, you know, my awesome ebook that you're promoting through email, another campaign for my awesome ebook that you're promoting through whatever at an event. Each one of these combinations gets a distinct Salesforce campaign. Um, or option two, you have one campaign for each offer, and then the rest of it you infer through UTMs. I am personally firmly in the camp of option two because I think it just makes a lot less overhead for your marketing ops person. You can scale up infinitely to many channels without having to get mops involved as long as you're diligent about your UTMs. And once you go down the option two route, it is pretty important that you UTM everything. Option one, you might have unique landing pages for each channel, but option two is really dependent upon having those UTMs on all of your links. Um, as I said, I'm firmly option two here. It's just more scalable, and it I it can be fine to use option one. I won't fight a client who really wants to do that, but I'm I'm of the opinion you go option two. The really important thing though is that you're not mixing and matching channel and offer. So you don't want to have one campaign for my awesome ebook, one campaign for, you know, paid search, because now if you're somebody comes to your ebook through paid search, now you're either adding to two campaigns or trying to decide which one to add them to, and now you're just kind of mixing and matching, and it's no bueno. Um, so how do we typically get this UTM data into Salesforce? Sort of the classic way is you create fields on the lead, contact, and campaign member for those parameters. Not really exciting here, but one for each of them. They're free text, 255, um, 255 characters. Even if you're having pick list values for these in your builder, you want to have it be free text in Salesforce because we don't want something to fail to sync because it didn't match the pick list or whatever. We can fix that later if somebody messes up. Um, And then there's a couple different ways to actually capture it in a form field. You can do it from a cookie or directly from URL parameters. Um, but that doesn't necessarily work across all of your subdomains or as people are browsing around the website. So usually we will recommend using a script where somebody comes to the website with UTMs, script drops a cookie where we store those UTMs, that follows you around until you actually come to a form that you submit, and that same script will fill in the hidden fields from your cookie value. And then usually there's a flow or you know, historically process builder or maybe even Apex prior to those two existing will grab the values from the leader contact, stamp it onto the campaign member when it's created, and then null it back out on the leader contact so that we can receive new UTMs on subsequent conversions. Um, but you don't have to create all this yourself. I've already created a package. It's unmanaged. You can go and install it directly in your Salesforce org. It has all the fields you need and the flow that accomplishes this. Um, so there is another way that you can do this. I'm going to switch gears a little bit to program member custom fields. This is something that Marketo introduced a few years ago. They are fields that can store program specific data for each member. Um, so this can be used to replace kind of these temp or burner fields where you don't necessarily need it on the record itself, but it is something that is relevant for a particular program. This might be something like dietary preferences or t-shirt size or something specific to an event that doesn't necessarily need to live with the prospect forever. But some caveats here are it can only be used by local assets. So you can't, well, we'll come back to that in a second. So almost immediately after this was released, people were kind of like, oh, well, wouldn't it be cool if we could capture UTMs using program custom fields and then have that sync directly to the campaign member? But that wasn't an option. But in October 2022, Marketo released Program Member Custom Fields Sync, where you can actually sync those Program Member Custom Fields directly to Salesforce campaign member fields. It's pretty straightforward how to set it up. It looks kind of like this. Um, and so I wanted to experiment with, is this really a viable option? Can we replace sort of the old way of doing things with the lead and contact fields and then the automation on the Salesforce side to put it to the campaign member? So there are a few caveats to this program member custom field sync. Namely, as I mentioned, they can only be used with local assets. So if you are using global forms, you either have to switch over to using local forms within a program. That's going to be a big no-no for me. Or you still need those lead and contact fields to capture the UTMs on your global forms and then flow steps within each of your content programs to actually stamp those from the lead and contact field to the program member custom field. Um, and using these requires that you use the program campaign sync, which not everybody loves. My hot take is it can be fine for some orgs, but um, there you have to use it if you want to use the program member custom field sync. It will not work with flow steps where you add to Salesforce campaign, sort of logically, because if you're just using a flow step, how does it know which program member custom fields to pull over? So that's a limitation there. So I decided to do, some experiments, just kind of show how this works. I set up in Marketo a local form, a global form with local and global pages, and then smart campaigns for filling out a local form or a global form on a local page, just to kind of see what it looks like. Um, so, going back, the local form, it will fill in directly those program member custom fields on the hidden fields itself because the form is local to the program, so it can populate it directly. Using the global form, I'm capturing it in those leading contact fields and then using these flow steps here to actually push it to the program member custom field. Both approaches work. You get Marketo records where those program member custom fields are populated. And if you're using the program campaign sync, right, it goes to Salesforce successfully, all look same, we're good to go there. And then I did another test where I filled it out a second time. Again, those values updated, great. And then I disconnected the program member custom sync or the program campaign sync and used a flow step to add to the campaign. So you can see that, okay, I did capture these parameters on the Marketo record, but because I'm using a flow step to add to the campaign rather than the program campaign sync, those program member custom fields do not get pushed over to Salesforce in the campaign member fields. So kind of distilling this down as I outlined earlier, I kind of still prefer doing it the old way of using person fields and a flow on the Salesforce side, um, because to me, using local forms is an absolutely non-starter. Um, the benefits of using global forms with Marketo is just way too vast to ignore. So I don't really think it makes any sense. So I would just cross off this local forms column entirely. You can make the program member custom fields and global forms work, but you still need those person fields. Um, you still need to use, you have to use the program member or the program campaign sync. Uh, there's more flow steps required in all of your content programs. Um, it's still kind of subject to the same race conditions and excuse me, of if somebody's filling out multiple forms in rapid succession, that you could potentially kind of overwrite those leading contact fields before it gets synced to the campaign member in Salesforce. That is not an issue when you do local forms because it's updating those program member custom fields directly rather than in flow steps. And kind of the older way, you also get full control of if or when those parameters are stamped on the campaign member in Salesforce. For example, you can say only on responses or only for certain campaign types or whatever, um, which you can't really do with the local forms, and you can kind of control for it in Marketo, but it gets a little bit more complicated. Um, and you can also control whether if I capture new parameters for the same campaign, do I update those UTMs or whatever. Um, so in my opinion, this middle column is a no-go. You can choose to use the program member custom fields and global forms. Benefits are that you can see it directly in Marketo where those UTMs are coming from for each program. Um, It'll definitely update with newer values if somebody's submitting the same form multiple times. Um, but I still prefer the older way myself. So just to sum up in the end, you want to be serious about your UTM strategy, having a UTM builder with standardized values. Everybody should know how to use it and use it all the time. Pick a campaign structure, stick to it. I'm going to plug option 2 for you. And then similarly, pick one of the options for how you're going to pass UTMs to Salesforce and stick to it. We don't want to be mixing and matching a little of column A, a little bit of column B. Like, no, everything should happen the same way across your org. Yeah, so that's it. And let me know if you have questions. Here's some links to kind of the resources I talked about earlier.